Good morning. It's good to see everyone today. I realize some of you may not come to the Route 9 corridor every single day. We've been building a library just a few blocks from here. You may have noticed since the library's gone up, the weather is like this every single day. And starting September 12th, you can come here every day and come in the library next week, so don't forget about that. Very excited about today. It's been a while in coming. There are a lot of people here, both within the county government, state government, municipal governments, as well as nonprofits and banks who had a lot to do with today's bill signing. So I want to start with all county employees. Just raise your hand if you could to be give them a round of applause. Today is really about turning liabilities into opportunities, turning vacant places into livable spaces. Every week we have something called TAPS. The police hold something called TAPS, Targeted Analytical Policing. And every Tuesday morning we look at the most violent communities across our county and we try to come up with collaborative ways to reduce the violence. Invariably, when you start going every week as we do, you see that certain properties start showing up time and time again. Almost always, those properties are vacant properties. They're blight. They're liabilities on communities. They reduce housing values and they take away from the fabric of neighborhoods. Now, how many of you can think of someone you know? How many of you can think of someone you know who would love to get a mortgage and buy a home, renovated home for $50,000? How many of you can think of someone you know? Yeah, how many would like to do it themselves? All right? Strong communities have nearly all owner-occupied homes. Strong communities have nearly all owner-occupied homes. And what we're doing today is another step forward in trying to create communities across our county and across our state that are predominantly owner-occupied, that give communities and homeowners a chance to feel pride in their community and a pride in the place that they live. There's a tremendous partnership to do this. Part of that partnership is a partnership across county government. When I came into office 8 months and 4 days ago, one thing that I heard consistently from my colleagues in county government was that the different departments of county government were not collaborating with each other. The department that went out and did code enforcement on homes was not always talking directly to the police. The office that was working on parks in certain neighborhoods was not always talking to the people doing code enforcement. So one thing we've tried to do within county government is bring people together. Another thing we've tried to do with the mayor and the governor is collaborate together to find how we can bring whatever resources we have to bear to address our most pressing problems across our largest city, across our largest county, and of course, across the state. And today is a large part of that. When I started, specifically Kathy Jennings, who's here somewhere, Carrie Casey, who's here. Yeah, give Kathy a round of applause. Carrie Casey, who's here, does a fabulous job, one of really the top housing advocates in the state. Marcus Henry, who's our head of community services. Where's Marcus? And Rich Hall, our head of land use. We sat down, give Rich a round of applause, sorry about that. We sat down and we developed a 7-part strategy to begin to address the 1,260 vacant homes in unincorporated Newcastle County. Now, a lot of these strategies are similar to what other cities and counties across the state and really across the country are trying to do. We made sure to collaborate with partners to move this strategy forward. The first thing we did is we drafted and passed an ordinance with the assistance of Newcastle County Council. In May, it strengthened our vacant property registry. So now, out of 1,260 vacant properties, 873 are registered. By registering vacant properties, we're identifying the problem. The first step to solving a problem is understanding and identifying it. So we're doing that. Next, we increased our enforcement and abatement. moving a lot of the external community costs that I talked about, the policing costs, the code enforcement costs, into fines and penalties on the homeowner. So if there's a tremendous cost the taxpayer is bearing, we want a larger and larger percentage of that cost to be borne by the party that's causing those problems. Third, we improve the efficiency of property rehab and resale. With the great work of the Land Use Department, we're now using GIS technology to inventory and analyze vacant properties. We also entered into aggressive collaboration with state and municipal partners, as well as a lot of the non-governmental partners who are here today, to address blight and vacancy, to look at the problem creatively, to look at best practices from across the country, and to implement them as quickly and efficiently as possible right here in the county. We also are more intensively looking at our collaboration with groups like Habitat for Humanity. Kevin Smith is here from Habitat of Newcastle County. Give him a round of applause. And Chris from Habitat of Kent County is here as well. And also Interfaith Community Housing. I don't know if Omar's here. But we're really looking at the vacant housing problem, not just as a housing problem, but an opportunity to create employment for those that are most in need of quality job opportunities. Finally, we created a state coalition, primarily under Kathy's leadership, bringing together nonprofits, government agencies, the AG's office, and the City of Wilmington to draft House Bill 187 and 188. And on June 30th, actually, I don't know how many of you were down in the legislature June 30th, not much was getting passed, let alone passed unanimously. And H. Bill 187 and 188, thanks to Senator Hansen, Representative Johnson, and the leadership of the House and Senate, actually passed unanimously on June 30th. So give them a round of applause as well. The legislation the governor is signing today will give local governments new tools to advance this strategy. It does so by ensuring that sheriff sale bidders are good faith owners and not bad actors with a history of tax and maintenance delinquencies. House Bill 188 empowers local governments to more effectively enforce property codes, so that if someone's violating a property lien, there's a property lien on a property, for us as a county government to enforce that property lien, we have basically the same powers we have in enforcing those that don't pay property taxes. It's a small point, but extremely important to those of us on the front lines here in Newcastle County. Look, turning vacant spaces into livable places is a serious challenge. You can see behind me, vacancy is not going to go away tomorrow. But if you look across the street over at 30 Halcyon, we couldn't hold this press conference there. We couldn't hold this bill signing there because someone actually lives there. That was a vacant house. And that's what this will turn into. And many of the vacant houses you see in this neighborhood will turn into something like that because of the collaboration that you see today. Your county government, in collaboration with the City of Wilmington, with the state, groups like Habitat and Interfaith, aren't going to give up. It's a hard problem. It involves a lot of economic byproducts, of which we're not the cause. But we're going to be out there on the front lines fighting this as hard as we possibly can, as creatively and collaboratively as we possibly can, to make sure there are stronger and better communities here in Newcastle County. As I mentioned, we're very fortunate to have a great collaboration and great collaborative partners in the governor and the mayor. The mayor in particular, because of his decades of background in real estate development, brings a skill set to this problem that someone like myself just can't bring. So we're very fortunate to have the mayor here today. He's going to come up and say a few words.
Thank you, Matt. I want to echo what Matt said about the three of us working together and having such great relationships from one jurisdiction to the other has just been of enormous benefit to all of us. And what's nice is we're friends, and that's a good place to start. When I ran for office, I always talked about what we have to do to help our city is to build our neighborhoods and strengthen our neighbors. Everybody wants, and obviously I don't have to tell anybody here, Wilmington's got an issue with crime that we wish were a lighter lift, but it's a serious matter. And everybody wants quick answers, and everybody wants the cops to do all the work. The fact is that the only way we're going to get crime under control is to build our neighborhoods. And if you take a look at so many of our neighborhoods, in the city, we have, Matt, we've got as many vacancies as you have. And we've got a tenth the population, and we've got that many vacancies. And I must tell you, I walked into this one and I said, if this is the worst you could find to make a case, we might be willing to take it. You know, we've got old houses that are run down, they're vacant, and they're in rough neighborhoods. And so our challenge is what we do with those neighborhoods. Now, let me tell you, one of our biggest problems is we've got landlords who don't do their work the right way. They're not professionals. They're bottom feeders, too many of them. They prey on the poor. They give them garbage to live in, and they extract as high rent as they can. So what we've done is we've amped up our enforcement responsibilities in the city. We're doing pre-rental inspections, which now amount to be just rental inspections because we've got already people living there. And we have found an alarming, you know, here's what's good. That doesn't even bother me. I see everybody looking at them. I mean, you know, the stuff you get when you go speak in public, that's nothing. I mean, I'm just happy someone's not yelling at me with the camera, you know, like the camera. You love that one, you know, because you know the first slip is right on Facebook, you know. So relax, it's not bothering me a bit. So JJ, Stephanie, thank you so very much for your attention to this. Kathy, no big surprise that you showed up in the middle of all this. This gives us the tools we need. It's remarkable what you find out when you get in here. Say, I want you guys to get out and do this. They say, Mayor, we're not allowed to do that. Translation is we don't have the tools to do what we need to do to enforce these communities. And this helps us immeasurably. And I want to thank you all for your great cooperation, your dedication to this. And I know together the sun's going to shine like this every day, Matt. Thanks.
We're also very fortunate to have the governor here today. Obviously, we wouldn't be here today without the governor's leadership on this issue. So please, Governor Carney.
Thank you very much, Matt. It is a real pleasure to be here with all of you. I couldn't be happier and more excited to be standing here in the sun with all of you sitting and standing around me, because it really makes me feel good and positive about our possibilities in working together in partnership to build strong neighborhoods across our state. If there's one thing that makes me excited about getting up every day, is that I know here in the state of Delaware we've got a great tradition of working together to address some of our more serious problems, and strengthening neighborhoods and making neighborhoods stronger is certainly an objective for all of us. And so to have a mayor like we do and Mike Brzezicki, and a county executive like we have in Matt Meyer, a HUD operation with Maria here representing the federal side. We've got an Ospinati here who's doing tremendous work for us, the State Housing Authority. We're represented here by the Newcastle County Police and Chief Bond I saw out there. I mean, we start in building strong communities with making communities safe. You can't have a strong community if it's not a safe community. I know the mayor and I are working hard on neighborhoods in the city where I live to make that a reality, and we're doing that across our state. You can't have strong communities and strong families without good schools. And we're working hard to do that in the city, in Wilmington and suburban Newcastle County and Kent County and Sussex County as well. You can't have strong communities unless you are able to deal with blight and vacant housing in those communities. And so for all the people here that do that, whether you're with Newcastle County government, about 20 people put their hands up when that was said, whether you're the sheriff of Newcastle County who does the sales, where's Sheriff Pratchett? He's here somewhere over the side. Whether you're Sheriff Mollahan, who's come all the way up from Kent County, he's got a sheriff badge on. Whether you're Nas and his team, which are going to make the funds available through our Strong Neighborhoods Initiative to actually turn this into a livable space, Mr. County Executive. We get the federal money to purchase it in the first place, the state money to rehab it, the county folks doing all the legwork on all of it. Working together is the only way we're going to be able to build strong communities. And that's why I'm delighted to be here with all of you, particularly members of this very strong community. I want to acknowledge the people who have made this possible, which is Representative J.J. Johnson, the sponsor of the legislation. Senator Townsend, who's not here, was the co-sponsor over in the Senate, represented by another sponsor of the legislation, Senator Hansen. Representative Kim Williams, who's here from out of her district to support this initiative. Carrie Casey's going around giving me winks about this one and that one, you know, here. I'd have a list this long, Carrie, and we know it takes a huge village, frankly, to do this kind of work. We have members from the banking community here, we have neighborhood leaders here, and we're going to hear from Lee Jarman, a leader in this community for decades. But before I give up this microphone, I want to make special recognition of our next speaker, which is Representative J.J. Johnson. I don't see Jay Street here yet. I understood he was to be here. But Representative Johnson, JJ as we love to call him, and Jay Street have been working on this Route 9 corridor, trying to do everything they can to strengthen these neighborhoods, these communities, for at least 10 years, maybe 12, going on 15, I would think. From dealing with the public safety issues that surround these communities, whether it's some of the things that happened in the parking lot out here at the new Wawa, which, by the way, replaced an eyesore that plagued this community for generations in the old hotel, Lord DeLawar Hotel, which took extraordinary cooperation among the county government, state government, the AG's office to take that thing down and to replace it with something positive. We still have issues there. From other public safety issues that we deal with and have dealt with the county police work in the neighborhoods, the state police work in the main corridors. Jay and JJ have been working on this diligently for such a long time. And the key piece of that puzzle is that new library that's just down this road and what it will do for the families and communities in this neighborhood. That too is a partnership between the city and the state. I'm sorry, this county and the state, as the funds that will build that facility come from both the county and the state, as will the operating funds. So I want to thank JJ and Jay Street in his absence for his leadership for over so many years here and for his sponsorship of this legislation, and invite him to the podium to say a few words.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for the introduction. I was just looking over the program. I think Jordan Seaman, did you write this up? JJ returns, introduces Lee Jarman, he returns. It sounds like the electric slide we're doing. I'm trying to follow it. Before I begin, I'd just like to introduce a couple people that have supported the community also. And they might not be up here sitting at the podium, but they are just as much as responsible as I am. And the first one is Sandra Smithers, president of Dunleavy Civic Association. Mrs. Williams is also a member of the Rose Hill Civic Association. Ron, who's a member of the 16th District, as well as a counselor at Rose Hill Community Center. Rashima Dixon, who is a city councilman at large, who works with me quite a lot in the South Bridge district, because I represent the South Bridge also. And before I go any further, I'd like to make full disclosure and say that I wasn't the first choice for this legislation. I support the legislation, and I had planned on being a co-sponsor. But I received a call from a member of the county who will remain nameless, who's Carrie Casey. And she said she was trying to get in touch with one of these representatives and they hadn't returned the call. And she explained to me about the legislation. And I said, well, I think you should get somebody else on that legislation because it has a lot to relate to the bank. What I'm talking about, the bank legislation that we passed earlier. And Brian Short and Brian Townsend were the sponsor of that legislation. Brian Short started off with the legislation and he got busy and had to drop it. So Carrie called me again, here as well as Brian, and asked me to lead this legislation. And frankly, I think one of the reasons why she called me several times is because the legislation has a lot to do with the complaints I call her about. About abandoned houses or code violations in the district. So she felt that I would be a perfect sponsor. So Carrie, thank you for seeing that in me, and I was glad to sponsor this legislation. The first bill, House Bill 187, actually is, it passed first. And it's, like I said earlier, it's the result of the land bank legislation that we passed earlier. And we find out that a lot of speculators or bad actors want to get involved with buying property, and when they buy their property, they don't upkeep it. They're buying it in speculation to see that other people that fix their property up would increase the value of their property. And this legislation addresses that. They establish a list, a qualifying list for the sheriff sales. House Bill 188 is a bill that gives not only Newcastle County, but anybody else that wants to be involved with this legislation teeth, and to be able to force homeowners to address their code violations. And in turn, if the county or the municipality or the government fixes up or addresses the county code, the code violation, they will be reimbursed for the work they've done. And that reimbursement can be put on their tax bill. So if they wanted to sell their properties or whatever, they would have to pay those fines or for code violation. So all in all, I think this is a good legislation. I think it's legislation that's long overdue. Like I said earlier, I call the county about complaints, and a lot of times they say, well, we've done the best we can, but with the tools we have, this is all we can do. But with this legislation, I think it's a real step forward. Another person I like to recognize too is Kathy Jennings. She was also one of the people that encouraged me to sponsor this legislation. And Kathy and I had worked before on legislation, more so in the criminal justice realm because she's working for the Attorney General's office. And we collaborated on a lot of the criminal justice legislation. So, Kathy, I want to thank you for your support also. Now, according to this electric slide I have here, I'm supposed to introduce Stephanie Hansen. So, Stephanie.
Thank you, Representative Johnson. This feels like old home week being back here. We're seeing so many county folks. which is great. I'm really glad now that I'm in a position that I can actually help the local jurisdictions with the problems that they face. And I've seen people here, yeah, yes. Having been there, you know, I recognize those problems are deep and wide, and any help that the General Assembly can give to the counties, I will certainly be there for you. And it's so nice to look around and see folks that I have known for decades. I mean, I see Jim Smith in the back and Norm Spector that goes back well into the early 90s. But there's someone here that's known me even longer. You'll never guess who it is. I'm sure no one up here will. Rashmi Rangan from DCRAG, from back in the 80s. Thank you, Rashmi. Well, I'd like to thank the Governor, Representative Johnson, Senator Townsend, and others who have focused on this issue and who have now given local governments some new tools to address and combat blight and provide oversight to make sure that those who have, in some cases, learned to game the system at the expense of our communities cannot gain a foothold. As the former president of Newcastle County Council, I know all too well the high costs that local governments are forced to bear with regard to vacant and abandoned properties. These properties absorb more in resources than their neighbors through increased calls from assistance from law enforcement to address crime, from code enforcement to address trash and unsafe conditions, and from our fire departments to address the increased risk of fire, which threatens not only the vacant property, but the surrounding homes as well. In fact, it's not just the risk of fire that affects the surrounding communities, the surrounding properties, but all of the conditions that attach to vacant and abandoned properties. Studies have shown that the presence of vacant and abandoned homes not only brings down property values in the surrounding neighborhood, but can actually affect the physical and mental health of the surrounding residents. According to the Journal of Urban Health, this link between vacant land and health can be further understood through the lens of physical disorder, which is described as visible cues in the environment that indicate lack of control over the neighborhood conditions, and it's associated with increased crime, fear, and further disorder. House Bill 187 and 188 give back some measure of control to local governments to combat this downward spiral in the life of a community by allowing them oversight of those that would buy these properties with no genuine intent to rehabilitate the properties, and by allowing local government to recover their costs and having to maintain the properties and expend local government resources in the course of doing so. As we look further into the solutions for combating blight and turning around our struggling communities, I look forward to partnering with our local governments and other state legislators and agencies to provide my support for these initiatives in the future. Thank you for inviting me here today. Now it's JJ with the electric slide.
You know, I like this. This gives me a chance to speak again. And I forgot to mention somebody earlier that was also a co-sponsor and is my colleague in the caucus. That is Kim Williams. So thank you for your support. And I also would be remiss if I did not mention, you know, the governor spoke earlier about Jay Street and I working together in this area. And Jay said he was going to be here, and hopefully he will be able to get here. But it was the governor who was then the lieutenant governor who called Jay and I and asked how could he help. He used to ride up and down Route 9 from Wilmington to Newcastle to see his family, visit his family. And he saw certain conditions in the area and wanted to know how he could help. He was lieutenant governor at the time and chairman of the Criminal Justice Council, director of Criminal Justice Council, which allowed him to have some funding. And he provided us with funding to address some of the issues in the area. So, Governor, thank you. Now I'd like to introduce the president of the Civic Association of Garfield Park and Overview Garden Civic Association, as well as the Friends of the Library, the chairman of the All Civic Association, the Grand Master Hall, Mr. Lee Jarman.
want to say good morning, good afternoon to everyone that is present. And I also want to thank Newcastle County's finest, and they're standing right out there. And because those are the ones that I call on a lot. And I also want to thank those who work on the inside that perhaps have a desk job, and because they feel the complaints that are called in from time to time. And in my pocket, I just put a copy of a letter that I received yesterday. And it's updating me on the status of a piece of property that was in disarray. So I thank Joe Day and his staff for making sure that things happen the right way. Now, some of you may know, some of you may not know that we have been fighting community deterioration for a long period of time. At one point in time, the state had what was called a 21st Century Fund. There's an organization called the Community Coordinating Council, which I chair. We received about a little over $3 million to address rehabilitation needs in Garfield Park, Overview Gardens, Dunleavy, Mancodale, and also Belvedere. And when I ride through those neighborhoods from time to time, I still see that those properties are well maintained. So if you want to know what it means to live next door to someone that has a property that is blightful and in disarray, and there's all kind of activity going on, I can probably tell you a lot about that. One of the things that I'm so proud of is this legislation, 187 and 188, and because it's well deserved, and it is needed, and it helps us tremendously. And I just want to share a story with you, because blighted property impacts, as was said before, young people. I can remember in one of my careers a long time ago, because I've had 2 different careers, and most of them have been helping children, young people. And so I'm in my office, and the young man was getting ready to leave, and I said, "Where are you going?" So he told me where he was going. And I said, "Well, I'm going in that same direction." Well, he said, "Well, I don't want to ride." And so I kind of pressed him a little bit, and I found out that he was ashamed of where he lived and didn't want me to see where he lived. And so I shared some of my experiences with him and changed his attitude. And I said, we can do better, and we can do great things if we work together. So I know the value of HUD, and I certainly do thank Mrs. Bynum for her role that she played. And I also know the role of the police in helping to change the environment, because that's a deterrent to crime and other things that fester in a neighborhood when there's properties in disarray. I also know that that when I look on the parcel view, Newcastle County's parcel search, and when I have a problem identifying who owns that property, I know there's a problem. And we have some of that in our neighborhoods now, because it's hard to track those people. And if you can't track them, then that burden falls on Newcastle County, because they've got to hire a contractor to come out to cut the grass or do whatever. And so from time to time, some of those people even confront me, because they know that I'm the president of the Civic Association, and they ask me questions about why did you? And I said, well, you know, we all have to follow the code. And so I don't mind that, because that goes along with the territory, but I do it in a nice way. And but I'm just so proud of our elected officials, of the governor. And one of the things the governor always does when he sees me is ask me about my grandsons. And they're always doing fine. And I think the reason he asked about one of them is because of the football thing. And my youngest grandson did play football. But again, I am so proud and thankful for everyone who attended this event today. And I'm hoping for a change for the better. Now, I made a comment to someone earlier, and I said, I hope there's no time limit, because if JJ goes before me, I won't have a chance to talk. So, but the way it worked out was fine. So again, I thank all of you. I thank all of you for coming. I look forward for great things. Thank you.
No, it's okay. So I'm Anas Benadi, Director of Delaware State Housing Authority. It's fun to be the last person between unsigned bill and a signed bill. So I will make it quick. This is just a great piece of legislation that's much needed, but what even more amazing to me is just the process of how it went from the bottom up, where the community, through the local jurisdiction, the nonprofits and other partners, doing what they are supposed to do, which is turning around some of these vacant properties, figured out that there was a need, and approaching our state legislators to make it happen. And Matt thanked folks who worked on this, and I have seen them on June 30th working on the hallways and trying to educate people as they go, and even called in for questions. So folks who were there on June 30th working on this, if you can just raise your hand one more time. Come on, Brian. Come on. Don't be shy. So thank you for your work. And this really gives a tool in the toolbox that was much needed. We at DSHA, we invested about $8.2 million in the Strong Neighborhood Fund, which came from the 2 settlements. And I want to thank the state legislators for trusting us with that money, and thank the folks from Department of Justice for helping us advocate for those funds. And these $8 million will be leveraged with about another $35 million from different sources to impact about 200 homes. And just in this area here, through state funding, we were able to allocate about $2.5 million that's being leveraged with $7 million. It's touching 82 homes just here on the Route 9 corridor. And one quick thing to Senator Hansen's point about the morality and the confidence of the residents, and what dilapidated homes like this can do to that. We had an event, I believe, last year, and it was a homeowner from the Habitat, Stephen, who lives on Kirkwood. And he came and spoke at a demolition event. We were demolishing a much worse-looking house than what we have here. And what he said really stuck with me, because he talked about how the house was not just impacting the home values of the community, but was creating a dent and a hit on the self-esteem of the residents, especially the youth who are driving and walking by those homes every day. And that's really why we are here. So without further ado, I invite the crowd to move to the other side of the yard so we can get this bill signed. Thank you.
Please. Anyone that wants to join the governor and Representative Williams? All right, we're going to start with House Bill 187. It was amended by Senate House Amendment number 1 and House Amendment number 2. All the signatures are on here. Then we're going to go to House Bill number 188. And again, these are tools to help this incredible partnership build stronger neighborhoods here in Newcastle County, in the City of Wilmington, and across our great state. There you have it. The sun just came out. How about that?